"You're done. Leave immediately." He said it like he was delivering a TED talk, standing there with his blazer sleeves half rolled and his teeth doing all the heavy lifting of his personality. I was 2 slides into the operational metrics that secured us 3 bridge rounds in 18 months. Real numbers, real sweat. When that preppy, over-gelled VP lifted a single hand, snapped once, and said it again, louder, like I was a waiter who'd just spilled soup on his $800 loafers. "You're done. Leave. Immediately." The room fell dead silent. Even the CFO's clicky pen froze mid-fidget. I heard my own heart thud once, like the sound a cracked drive makes right before it dies. My voice didn't shake, didn't even try to argue. I clicked the clicker once, closed the slide deck mid-transition, and stepped away from the podium with the kind of quiet you learn from building things no one ever gives you credit for. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at the board. I looked straight at the Zoom panel where the lead investor's window, top left, always watching, tilted slightly as he cocked his head. He didn't blink. He just reached for a thick manila folder on his desk, opened it, and started flipping. By the way, if you're listening to this and you're in that 97% who haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit the button, throw us a like. It keeps this kind of truth-telling going. Seriously, it helps more than you think. I walked off that stage with my spine straight, heels clicking louder than my heartbeat. No tears, no drama, just a strange, almost narcotic calm. Like the kind that floods in when the worst thing has already happened and you realize. You planned for it. Back in the green room, the intern holding the mic pack stuttered, unsure whether to help me or stay out of whatever political fallout he just witnessed. I handed him the pack, said thank you, then grabbed my laptop case and coat like I'd simply finished a meeting early. Down the hall, I could already hear the new VP talking over me, pitching some half-baked buzzword salad about lean reinvention and optimizing legacy bloat. Like I was a bulge in the company's stomach he needed to vomit out for the sake of digestion. But that investor's face wouldn't leave my mind. The way he didn't flinch, the way he started reading. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the elevator. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Another buzz. Then a third. Internal Slack pinged. Then my email. I ignored them all. Because somewhere in that folder, maybe on page 6, maybe in the margin of the amendment I sent at 2:47 a.m. 6 months ago, was a clause he was just now reading. A clause the fresh-faced VP had clearly never even known existed. The elevator doors closed, and I smiled for the first time that day. 6 months earlier, I was in my usual spot, corner conference room, 5th floor, the one with the humming vent that everyone else avoided. My laptop was open, coffee going cold, and I had 2 phones on speaker. One line was our internal counsel trying to explain how the original investment charter was never designed for this scale of growth. The other was the lead investor's legal rep, who'd clearly had it with our startup's duct-taped approach to governance and wanted it buttoned up before Series D. I'd built most of the operational framework they now ran on: supply chains, distribution partnerships, the vendor onboarding protocol they plastered across their damn website as a revolutionary procurement model. They always trotted me out to make it sound clean. Never flashy, just solid. But governance? That was something no one wanted to touch until it became a liability. So they sent it to me. No ceremony. No public thanks. Just a forwarded email with 6 attachments and a one-liner from the COO. You know this stuff. Make it compliant. I rewrote the whole thing in 3 weeks. Page by page, I restructured the roles, contingencies, approval trees, deleted legacy lines written by people who hadn't logged into our dashboard in years. And buried deep in Section 3, Operational Continuity, I added one line, one single clause, right after the standard language about emergency succession. In the event of material funding events exceeding $10 million USD, continued operational stability shall require presence in advisory or transitional capacity of full name redacted. Removal or termination shall constitute a breach of operational continuity, nullifying all outstanding funding obligations unless otherwise renegotiated with lead signatories. It was boring, legalistic, quiet. No one read that far unless they were paid by the hour. I ran it through 3 compliance reviews. No one blinked. I even flagged it to legal as new language per investor discussion and received a thumbs up emoji and a green check. I didn't do it because I was paranoid. I did it because I knew the type. The ones who slide into your company with degrees hotter than coffee and zero understanding of why things don't break. They think operations are magic, or worse, replaceable. Back then, the new VP hadn't even been hired yet, but I could already hear his voice. I knew what it would sound like: confident, impatient, strategically shallow. I knew he'd smell blood the second he saw a woman in her 40s running point on distribution ops without a fancy title, especially one who didn't flirt, didn't overshare, didn't play lunchroom politics. Just built systems that worked. I wasn't trying to burn the place down. I just built an escape hatch in case someone else lit the match. The clause wasn't revenge, it was insurance. And now it was activated. The office felt colder than usual, not in temperature, just in tone. You'd think after 10 years, packing up would sting a little more. But truth is, I'd started compartmentalizing months ago. One file drawer at a time. One digital archive after another, renamed and tagged and encrypted under operational legacy, like I was already a ghost, prepping for her own wake. I could hear the VP laughing from the executive suite. They'd ordered champagne and catered poke bowls, his idea of celebrating a clean break. Someone was giving a toast, probably some PR fluff about bold pivots and next-gen leadership. My name wouldn't be mentioned unless it was in past tense. He thought he'd won, that he'd performed a surgical removal of what he kept calling middle-mile drag. His words, not mine. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't shred paper or leave a bitter note. That's amateur hour. I just placed the company-issued MacBook on the desk, powered down, and opened my personal laptop, an old Lenovo with a cracked hinge and a keyboard that still smelled faintly of jet fuel from a trip to Jakarta 3 years back. I pulled up the clean PDF, final signed version of the investment agreement, watermarked and time-stamped, complete with the amended charter I'd authored. Section 3 was on page 48. I scrolled to the clause. My name, my contingency, my signature baked into the funding mechanism like a hidden fuse. 2. LegalTeamInvestmentFirm.com. Subject, Operational Continuity, Clause 3. Reference. Hi, per recent events, please find attached the relevant governance documentation, executed copies, and time-stamped amendments relating to Section 3. Kind regards, M. Then I hesitated for a second. Not out of doubt. Just timing. A chess move is all about when you move, not how. I added one more address to the BCC field. He'd been off the grid for almost 8 months, supposedly hiking through Patagonia, or meditating in Lisbon, or whatever burned-out tech co-founders do when the board pushes them gently aside. But if I knew him, and I did, he was still reading the right inboxes. I hit send. Watched the wheel spin. Message delivered. Down the hallway, someone whooped. Glasses clinked. A round of forced applause. Let them toast. Let him smirk. Let him post about decisive leadership and removing friction. Because he hadn't read the playbook. He didn't even know there was one. He was standing on a trapdoor he couldn't see, in loafers too shiny to grip anything real. I zipped up my coat, took one last look at the whiteboard, still covered in last quarter's logistics roadmap, and erased it with a single swipe. Clean slate. In 24 hours, he'd be in a meeting he didn't schedule, staring at an investor he didn't impress, trying to explain why the funding agreement he never bothered to read now made him the breach. And me? I wouldn't be there. Because this wasn't revenge. It was preparation. The emergency Zoom was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. Pacific, which meant the East Coast investors were already caffeinated and impatient, and half the board was still digesting whatever brunch bravado the VP had been spewing the day before. No agenda. Just a blunt subject line from the lead investor himself. Clause 3, immediate clarification required. The room was digital, but the tension, tangible. Every square on the screen flickered with tight jaws, darting eyes, or fake neutral expressions only execs think they're good at faking. The VP showed up late, 2 minutes and 43 seconds in, clicking in with that same smug half-smile like he'd just walked out of a GQ feature on young visionaries to watch. "Good morning, everyone," he said, adjusting his collar and nodding like he'd orchestrated the whole thing. The lead investor didn't even greet him, just held up a printed packet to the camera. Yellow post-its jutted out the sides like legal battle flags. "I'd like someone," he said flatly, "to explain why the individual referenced in Clause 3 of our signed agreement was terminated mid-demo yesterday." Silence. The VP blinked, shifted, let out a short laugh like this was a harmless misunderstanding. Yeah, that's..." Probably referring to our previous operations lead. "We've since streamlined that role. The clause was based on a draft that's, no longer relevant." "Interesting," the investor replied. No tone, no inflection, just deadly neutrality. "Because this," he flipped to the page, tapped it once, "is the final, signed amendment, time-stamped 6 months ago. Cross-signed by your legal team, explicitly naming her as a continuity condition for the full release of capital. Did you read it? Legal counsel, a junior who'd been with the company all of 12 weeks, stammered something about cross-checking versions and possible oversight." The CFO turned gray. The board chair went rigid. The VP leaned in, trying to play assertive, but his forehead was already glistening. "With all due respect, that clause was a formality. The current direction of our team reflects updated strategic goals. We're already preparing a revised structure." "Stop," the investor cut in. One word, sharp enough to shave bone. Then he held the document closer to the camera, tapped again. "This is not optional. Reinstate her, or the deal's off. Today, not next week, not once you restructure. Today. Clause 3 is binding. You're in breach." No one spoke, not even to breathe. The VP opened his mouth like he had one more pivot in him, another spin about growth phases or agile leadership, but all that came out was air. Useless, empty air. The investor sat back in his chair, folded his hands, and stared dead into the camera. Last chance? My camera was off, my mic muted. But I watched from the waiting room with surgical precision, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug like I was watching a bad actor forget his lines in the middle of a live broadcast. Vindication didn't need applause. It needed silence. And I got it. By noon, I had 17 missed calls. 5 from HR, 3 from the VP's executive assistant, who I'm sure was fed some line about mending bridges, and 1 from the board chair, whose subject line read, "Let's reconnect. Open to a conversation?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The body probably read like every panic-soaked message written by someone realizing they'd bet on the wrong horse, full of half-baked empathy and corporate euphemisms like miscommunication, overstep, and regrettable oversight. They were scrambling. I wasn't. The best part? They thought silence meant indecision. They hadn't figured out yet that I'd already moved. 3 days before the investor Zoom, while the VP was still throwing his chest around the office like a reality show contestant, I'd filed the paperwork for a new holding company, Clause 3 Strategies, LLC. Clean, untraceable, by anyone not directly searching Delaware's registry. Registered agent address. Prepped website stub. Logo in draft. And a bank account that now existed solely for licensing agreements they hadn't even realized they'd need. See, the systems I built? They weren't just dashboards and workflows. They were embedded into the company's operational DNA. The stuff that doesn't look like much on paper until something breaks. The procurement templates. The logistics heuristics. The vendor arbitration protocols. Half the back end ran on a proprietary efficiency model I'd designed under advisory terms now owned by Clause 3. So when HR called again at 3:22 p.m., leaving a voicemail where they awkwardly danced around the word reinstatement, I sat at my kitchen counter, watching the blinking notification like it was a magic trick. Poof. Desperation. The VP didn't call directly, coward, but his assistant did, using her personal number this time. Just wanted to check if you'd consider a quick Zoom tomorrow. No pressure. Totally on your terms. My terms. That was the first accurate thing they'd said all week. And still, I didn't reply, because silence has gravity. It makes people fidget, project, fear. They assumed I was licking wounds, nursing some ego bruise. Probably imagined me replaying that boardroom humiliation over and over like some career lowlight. They had no clue that I'd already mapped the whole endgame before their panic even began. I wasn't trying to reclaim my job. I wasn't interested in walking back through those glass doors like some prodigal team player. What I wanted, and what I was now perfectly positioned to demand, was structural. Clause 3 wasn't just a clever name. It was a reminder of what happens when you ignore the architect and glorify the mouthpiece. Now they could either deal with the ghost they tried to bury, or negotiate with the entity she became. The cafe was nearly empty when he walked in. Same frayed Patagonia jacket, same worn boots, same look in his eyes that used to say, "I haven't slept, but I'm building something that matters." Only this time, it said something different, something heavier. The kind of look someone wears after realizing they handed the keys to the house they built over to a stranger who couldn't tell the difference between a load-bearing wall and a glass one. He slid into the seat across from me without a word. Just a soft exhale through the nose and a small nod that said, "Yeah." I saw it too. We didn't small talk, didn't pretend the last 8 months hadn't happened. No forced smiles, no "how have you been" nonsense. Just two people who'd been gutted by the same machine, one chewed up, the other quietly spit out. He stirred his coffee, black as mine. Finally said, "They told me bringing in outside leadership was the only way to scale. Said we needed Polish. Credibility for the next round?" He snorted. "They brought in shiny suits and empty hands. I should have fought harder. I didn't say I told him so. I didn't have to. They fired you on stage," he added, finally looking up at me. Mid-sentence, in front of our largest investor. Jesus. "They thought it was a flex," I said. "Didn't realize it was breach." That got the ghost of a smile out of him. Not happy, but familiar. The kind of smirk we used to trade after late-night deploys that worked the first time. He pulled a small folder out of his bag, beat up, edges frayed, same kind of manila I'd seen in the investor's hand days earlier. "I still have these," he said, tapping the papers. "Class A shares, 2 of them, dormant but still active. I didn't sign them over when I stepped down. Board didn't notice." I raised an eyebrow. "That gives you voting rights." He nodded. "And combined with Clause 3? I finished his sentence for him. "We control the floor." It wasn't revenge we were building. It was equilibrium. A course correction. He'd been the soul of the company once. Vision, grit, failure baked into the walls. I'd been the bones, quiet systems, structure, repeatable logic no one ever praised unless they failed. We weren't trying to go back. We were trying to keep it from going further off the rails. "There's one more step," I said, pushing a slip of paper across the table. It wasn't dramatic. No declarations, no hidden trap. Just a summary of what Clause 3 Strategies LLC offered. Licensed access to the ops systems under new terms. No personal return, no title, just leverage. "You take your seat back on the board," I said. "I don't want back in the building. I want the license signed, and I want the contract to run through me." He looked down at the paper, then back at me. "I read your clause," he said quietly. "It wasn't about protecting your job. It was about protecting the foundation." I nodded. "And the funding?" He leaned back, drained the rest of his coffee. "They're not ready for this." "They don't have to be," I replied. "They just have to vote." The side room wasn't technically a boardroom, just a narrow conference space off the main floor, half lit by morning sun and echoing with the hum of HVAC. No formal seating chart, no catered spread, just 3 legal pads, 1 speakerphone, and 5 very nervous people pretending they hadn't just screwed the pooch in front of a $50 million investor. I stood at the far end of the table, coat still on, calm as stone. In front of me sat a single page, 1 sheet. No legal jargon, no performative fluff, just the terms, my terms. "I'm not coming back," I said, voice flat but steady. "I don't want a title. I don't want a desk. I want structure." The board chair, a woman who once praised my grace under pressure, right before siding with the vote to bring in shiny suit boy, furrowed her brow like that changed the stakes. "We'd be more comfortable bringing you back in an interim capacity, for stability." "No," I replied. "What I'm offering is stability, through Clause 3. As a licensed entity, we manage the systems, enforce standards, ensure delivery. No politics, no personalities, just performance. The room shifted. CFO cleared his throat. Legal counsel glanced at the printout again, like the fonts would rearrange into something easier to accept. Even the HR rep looked like she wanted to crawl into the fern in the corner and disappear. Then came the line I'd been waiting for. The board's junior legal analyst, fresh out of Georgetown and probably still memorizing where to stand during meetings, opened his laptop and said, carefully, "We've also received some late-stage verification concerns regarding Mr. Anders's professional history. The VP, that smug, overconfident crash test dummy in human skin." I didn't blink. The lawyer continued, voice low. "There are, discrepancies in his prior role at Aviantech. Specifically, his title was inflated, and there were civil complaints related to hostile workplace conduct. Settled. Sealed." The board chair visibly winced. CFO leaned back like he'd just tasted vinegar. I stepped closer. Let the silence thicken. "Look," I said, "this isn't a loyalty test. It's math. The investor's position is clear. Reinstate operational stability, or the funding dies on the floor. Clause 3 still holds. You've already breached it. This," I tapped the paper, "is your parachute. Not for me. For the company." The board didn't argue, not because they agreed, but because they were cornered. The co-founder walked in 5 minutes later, didn't say a word, just nodded once, folded his arms, and leaned against the wall like a silent sentinel. The message was obvious. The vote's coming, and this is your last chance to get ahead of it. I slid the paper toward the chair. 1-page proposal, licensing agreement, new operational model. I get final say on implementation. I nodded toward the VP's empty chair, is out or the money's gone. No yelling, no threats. Just contract law, clean leverage, and the kind of inevitability that doesn't require volume to land like a freight train. Outside, the real board meeting was waiting. Inside, their hands were already starting to tremble. The boardroom was still as a tomb when I walked in. All that glass and brushed steel, but none of the usual ego, the posturing, the bad jokes, the empty jargon. Just tension thick enough to drown in. The VP was already seated, tapping his pen like it was a tic he hadn't developed until this morning. Hair too perfect, jaw too clenched. His suit fit better than his lies ever had. The board chair called the meeting to order without looking at him. Legal started first, no dramatic build-up, just facts laid out like a ledger of failure. Clause 3, binding, language reviewed, signed, time-stamped. Termination, unauthorized. Current operational status, legally non-compliant, pending immediate rectification or total funding collapse. Then came the twist of the knife. Counsel lifted a separate sheet, the background check summary. Recent findings call into question the accuracy of Mr. Anders's declared work history. Multiple discrepancies, along with 2 sealed civil settlements involving prior misconduct allegations. The VP tried to jump in, some desperate word salad about meritocratic progress and legacy personnel bottlenecks, but nobody cared anymore. The room had moved past him. He just hadn't caught up yet. The lead investor's window lit up on the screen. No emotion. Just eyes like twin scalpels, and a voice like gravel soaked in disapproval. I trusted this company because of its foundation, not because of the faces you hired to smile at pitch decks. Then he turned to me, just a glance, and added, Clause 3, smart insurance. and that was it. The board chair looked around the table. Motion to remove Mr. Anders from executive duties effective immediately. All in favor? One hand went up, then another, then 5 more. The VP stood halfway, like he was going to protest, but sat back down when he realized no one was looking at him. No one needed to. He was already erased. The chair cleared her throat. Interim structure as follows. Co-founder returns in a non-executive oversight role. Operational architecture will be licensed through Clause 3 Strategies LLC. Implementation authority to remain with the licensee until further vote. My name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. This wasn't about titles. This wasn't about being back in. This was about design. Control through structure, not presence. Influence through architecture, not applause. The meeting ended with no handshakes, just nods, agreements, weight shifting from chaos back into alignment. As I stood, the investor unmuted one last time. By the way, he said, almost smiling, Clause 3, it's going in all our future charters. You set a hell of a precedent. I nodded once, no thank you, no false humility, because this wasn't luck. It was leverage, written in ink before they ever saw the storm coming. The office was nothing like the one I'd left. No open plan chaos, no ego walls lined with motivational quotes or startup awards, no one dusted. Just a clean corner suite in a low-rise building, overlooking a quiet street and a row of ginkgo trees turning gold. There was no ceremony, no champagne, just a courier-delivered envelope placed neatly at the edge of my desk, along with a metal pen and a small post-it from my new associate. Final version. All approved. I read every line. Not because I didn't trust my lawyer, I did, but because every clause in this agreement was mine. Born from hard lessons and quiet fury. Lines written not in anger, but in surgical intent. Every paragraph was a checkpoint. Every subpoint, a reinforcement against history repeating itself. The co-founder's name was listed as non-executive strategic advisor. The investor had co-signed on an oversight committee for transparency. And Clause 3 Strategies LLC? We weren't listed under contractor or consultant. We were the operational engine, licensed custodians of process, performance, and compliance. No execution without our validation. No decisions without our sign-off. Control without presence. Power without proximity. The door creaked open. My assistant stepped in, placed a second coffee on the desk beside mine, and nodded toward the document. They're expecting confirmation by end of day. I nodded. Then, without flair, without pause, I reached for the pen and signed at the bottom of the page. Principal Consultant. Clause 3 Strategies, LC. Not my name, not a title from the past. Just the name of the structure that now wrapped around theirs. There were no fireworks, no dramatic monologues, no revenge playlist echoing in the background. Just the sound of the pen scratching softly, clean and final, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing. They fired me mid-sentence. Now every word they say runs through my contract.